Looks like we've got a bunch of people in here, so I'd like to kick things off and introduce myself. My name is Andrew Peart. I do the media relations and broadcasting for the Edmonton Oil Kings. This is our second virtual Q&A of this season with Hockey Edmonton, and our many thanks to them for helping us organize this. Tonight, we have Jamie Porter on the call with us. He is our director of scouting. He's been with us for 3 years here in Edmonton, but brings with him a long list of prior knowledge in the Western Hockey League, working with the Swift Current Broncos for the last number of years, serving in several different capacities. Director of hockey operations, assistant general manager, was their head scout at one point, and started things off by being an area scout with the Broncos. So there isn't a lot that Jamie hasn't done in the Western Hockey League, and we'll certainly be tapping into that knowledge here tonight as we try and get you fine folks set up and looking at maybe a potential path to the Western Hockey League and some of the reasons why you should follow that path. So I'll start things off, Jamie, and we'll get right into the questions. We had a number of them submitted to us through Hockey Edmonton, through a bunch of the families that are on the call with us here tonight. And I'm going to put you on the spot because this is always a tough one for scouts. Goalies. When it comes to goalies, how do you go about identifying them, and what are you looking for in a 14-year-old goaltender when you're out there scouting them ahead of the draft?
Really, we had to start with goaltenders. Really, there's a uniqueness to the position, obviously. There's only 2 jobs every season. There's a lot of similarities from being a skater. Is he a good teammate? Is he competitive? Does he work hard? Is he good in practice? We look for those regular traits. At the same time, you want to know if he's working on his craft because it's unique. Does he have a goalie coach? Do they do anything specific for him away from the rink? We like goaltenders that are athletic. We like guys that have a plan. Does he do any yoga? Is he worried about his stretching? Does he have a mental aspect to his game? Does he have a plan for that? And you want to see a goalie play well. You want to see what the ceiling is. And you want to see a goalie play bad because you want to see where the basement is. You want to see how he reacts after he gives up a bad goal or 2 bad goals. What's he like after a bad night or a bad period? If it's someone that we're really interested in, we even circle back after he's had a bad night or 2 just to see how he bounces back and reacts. We compare it to a playoff series. In a playoff series in the Western League, it's 7 games. You play 1 and 2, day off, 3 and 4. Then you play alternate nights. If a goalie can't reboot, if he can't put a bad night away from him, the series can be over before he gets himself back again. So we look for those aspects a little bit also. Like if he's big, does he got good angles? Does he have good technique? If he's small and a reflex guy, is he quick? He is what he is. Is he good enough at what he does and what he brings? So that's what makes it a little more unique because everybody has an opinion on goaltenders, and I've got a couple of old school staff that, boy, he just feels like a goalie. And I have seen teams, and I have been a part of teams that have drafted a guy that you've pretty much only seen him in warm-ups because the schedule never works out. A little known fact, Nashville has a goaltender named Picarine. They never got to see him play in a game. He played in North Finland. Every time they went up to see him play, he didn't get the start. It's all based on warm-ups. I pray that never happens to us, but that situation is there.
Maybe touch on the goaltenders that we have here in Edmonton because you've seen them a few times, and they're all certainly unique with Sebastian Cossa, Colby Knight, and Colby Hay. How do you go about sort of differentiating the different styles of goaltenders and maybe what best fits your program?
Well, this organization has always been deep in goaltending. They have a long history of it with Laurent Brossoit and Tristan Jarry. Sebastian has come in now. We have Colby Hay and Colby Knight with us because we're carrying 3, in our cohort. Part of it is you've already made a determination as a scouting staff that this is a guy that you're very interested in. Part of it is going back to your goalie coach, who's Curtis Muka for us, and getting him to watch the kid a little bit too, or at least see some video on him. Does Curtis see a flaw that we don't see? Is there something about his style that Curtis wouldn't be comfortable working with? Goalie coaches and goalie scouts don't always are on the same page, so you've got to kind of negotiate in between that a little bit. The challenge for an organization is you always want to have a starter. You want to have a backup who can potentially be a starter. You want a third guy in the pipeline that hopefully can fill one of those two roles. And you'd like to have a fourth guy that you've just drafted or as a younger guy that you can just leave alone for a couple of years. That's the ideal scenario. Now, we don't all get that. And the logic would be to have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old and have yourselves ready for that. But you see with Sebastian, I mean, he is a big athletic guy. You know, he moves very well. He's quite fiery. Colby Knight is got good size, quick reflexes. He's a little more calm. He likes to be a little more unemotional about things. And then Colby Hayes, kind of a little bit of both of them in between. He's a big guy. He's got a little bit of fire to him. He's got some agility to him. He's got some good techniques. So we don't have a cookie cutter goaltender that we look for all the time, but we're always more worried about what years to be aggressive in the draft to take one and what years that we can be careful in. And right now we feel that we're quite deep. We've got those three, and then we've got Worthington in Saskatoon right now playing for the Warman that we probably weren't going to be as aggressive in taking a goaltender last year. And as the night went on in the draft, his name just continued to stay at the top of our list. We're obviously quite high on him. So at some point it just stood out so much and we took him. So we think that we've got, you never have an overabundance of goaltending, but we're quite comfortable with where we're at right now.
I guess we'll just move from the crease on outward. So let's get to the defensemen. They come in different makes and models, different skill sets, different sizes. What goes into scouting a defenseman?
Well, you want a guy that can be calm. You want a guy that can play under pressure. You want a guy that's not concerned about going back to retrieve pucks when you've got forechecking coming on you. You want someone that can quickly make decisions and look at his outlets. You know, you only have so much time. The thing about defensemen is that there are power play guys, there are defensive guys, there are guys that can do a little bit of both. There are guys that can be quite physical. There are guys that can just carry the puck up ice. So you want to make sure that you have a little bit of everything in your stable at that time, right? You're never going to have a good power play unless you've got a good quarterback. And you're really going to spend a lot of time in your own zone if you don't have somebody that can move the puck for you. And it all starts at the back end coming out. So they've got to certainly have some puck skills for that.
When it comes to forwards, you know, is it as simple as, and I think I know the answer to this, in hockey, nothing is ever as simple as it seems, but you just look at a guy who's got, you know, great bantam stats and think, okay, this could be a guy that's on our radar. How do you maybe go about identifying some of the guys that you could see being, you know, those solid two-way guys, or a guy that you can insert on your third and fourth line and be key checkers for you in those playoff series you mentioned about goaltenders?
Well, I think that's kind of where the challenge is that a scorer is going to score at some point, but he may not be able to score at the Western League level until it's too late. And if you've got the skill set, you're able to skate, and you've got some ability and some hockey sense, and you're able to handle the puck well, you know, there's going to be a spot for you somewhere. Some guys just find as they get older what they are. You know, they just kind of define themselves a little bit. If you're on a deep team, you may start lower down the lineup than you're used to, and you may find yourself, that's a strength for you. If you are on a weaker team, you may play up on the lineup a little bit more and then see where you fit in, where the watermark is. Not everybody's going to score. Not everybody's going to check. And you see those traits a little bit when they're younger, but for the most part at the lower levels, they're all the guy on their teams. Unless they're playing for a seriously deep bantam or midget team, everybody in the higher end are going to be in some way, shape, or form are going to move on. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to put numbers up. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that hard-working two-way guy that plays responsible and, you know, brings everything to the table every single night.
Mm-hmm. We'll get into some of the more specific questions. We got one coming in from a coach who coaches U9 and U11. At that age, what kind of things should he be doing to help prepare some of his players to take that next step?
Well, I think the main thing that we get concerned with is teaching the fundamentals and worrying about the skill set more than worrying about systems and winning games. Um, you know, we still have situations where we draft a player, and even at even a high guy, and he gets to us, and there's something missing in his toolbox. We have a great example from a couple of weeks ago. You were sitting in the stands watching practice with me. We were doing a pass out of the corner with the D-man dragging across the blue, and one of our better D-men can't do it. He cannot drag it and shoot while moving. He just never been taught to do it. He's an exceptional defenseman, and he plays a regular shift for us, and he was laughing that he wasn't able to do it. He just thought it was hilarious that it was a skill set that he'd never worked on, and when he got to our level, everybody is just dragging, lifting up, shooting, and here he was struggling all the way through it. So I think that's kind of the concern, is you're more worried about building the player than you are about winning games and winning tournaments. And I know that there needs to be a balance between the two, but that is always our main concern, is just worrying more about the skill set and developing the player than worrying about systems and team play and winning games.
Another question coming. This is more player specific. He's going into his WHL draft year. What can he do to stand out from the rest of the draft class?
Well, the standard line is always do what you are. Like if you are a checker, then you be the best checker you can be. If you're a two-way guy, be the best two-way guy that you can be. If you are a skilled guy, then you need to be skilled. Don't try to do what you're not. And we have the same problem with defensemen, goaltenders. Know what you are. Bring that to the table every night. It's always unique when we're sitting down with a player after training camp and he's one of the free agents and he's really talking about how he's going to put numbers up, and I'm going to run a power play, and I hope you guys follow up with me. I'm going to put some serious numbers up. And we happen to tap into the computer and see that he's only scored 2 goals in the last 3 years. Do what you do best. Know what you are and bring that to the table. And trust me, even with what's gone on this year, scouts are going to find guys. Scouts are going to be out.
This brings me to the next question, and it's kind of interesting because I think we actually, on our trip down to Red Deer last weekend, it's something that I asked you about, was how young does a scout start to identify a player to watch for their development ahead of the WHL draft?
Well, for the most part, I mean, we come across guys at different times. You sometimes see guys at the Brick, and you sometimes see guys at any kind of summer camp or practices or whatever else. But for the most part, we really start that first year of Bantam. We have a scouting system in our hockey program where, we color code everything for players. And if we see somebody that's a first year, we tag him and he goes into this box. And when we're watching the draft class, we're still kind of paying attention to what's coming next. I mean, we don't go back too many years, but I mean, usually through that whole Bantam age, we start running into guys, and sometimes you start hearing about somebody ahead of time, especially if it's an Alberta kid or somebody like Bedard, who we knew about for a few years beforehand, just because everybody talks about him. But it's usually just in that Bantam age group.
This one comes from a parent. Because of the COVID season, my son wasn't able to show his growth, skills, height, weight. Question didn't end up getting finished, but I'll finish it for them. How will scouts approach to sort of tracking those sort of things, assuming come the fall we're able to sort of get some sort of normalcy back?
Well, it's going to be almost like a do-over for that age group for the draft. The WHL scouts are going to have to be concerned with both the 06s and the 07s. We're going to have 2 drafts, and 06s first, obviously. Midway point through the season, and then the 07s at the end, like we historically do. So the scouting staffs are going to have to come up with some sort of a plan where either some guys are going to watch 06s and some are going to watch 07s, or some are going to go back and forth. Some teams are going to identify one first and work on one second. All it's doing is putting those people, it's just moving the schedule back 6 months, let's say. But nothing will change. It'll be the same as it was before. You have to allow the scouts some time to go out and see them and watch them. And like I said, nobody gets lost anymore. We're doing a lot more video now. That's certainly one of the areas that has grown because of COVID. So it's really hard to fall through the cracks nowadays. There's too many teams, too many scouts, too many resources.
Something you kind of already touched on. So apart from being able to drag and shoot from the blue line, what skills are you seeing some of the players at our level struggle with the most as they maybe make that transition from minor hockey into major junior?
Well, I think a lot of guys just take for granted that, that at some point their skating and their puck skills are enough. I think guys take it for granted that once they have an idea of what they are, they don't need to work on the parts of their game that are not going to be as prevalent when they play. And I think that's the mistake, is not trying to be as well-rounded as you can be. You should always be able to work on your skating. You should always be able to be working on your puck skills. I had an old scout used to always laugh and talk about the fact that Paul Coffey was taking power skating into his 40s. So if Paul Coffey's taking power skating, everybody should take power skating. You watch the drills in the summer of the NHL guys working on their puck skills in different situations. You're never going to get to a point where you've solved something. You need to always continuously be worrying about those things. And you should be looking for as much feedback as you can and be honest about taking it. Coaches don't give you feedback to try to break down parts of your game for you. It's to help you to take that next step, and being able to process that and understand that information. That's a big part about being a player at the next level.
So we've kind of identified what you're looking for to bring these players eventually to have their name called potentially at the WHL draft. So let's get into, once they're drafted, what sort of comes next for them after they join the organization as a drafted player.
Well, we'll specifically for an Edmonton Oil King. We usually have a development camp in the summer. Usually sometime in June and June or July. Have the guys come in for a weekend. You get to tour the facilities. You skate a couple times on the ice. You get to meet all of our staff. You get an idea of what goes on to in the background of a WHL organization, what the support staff looks like. I'm not just talking about training staff and equipment staff, but what our education advisor's job is, how the billet coordinator organizes things, and what it looks like to travel, what a day looks like, what your week could look like in a month, just to give you an idea of all of that. And then there's some time where you're going to spend with the coaching staff and the management staff and talk about what the next year is going to look like, and maybe the next 2, maybe the next 3. We always try to really emphasize to our players that everybody's on their own path, and each path is going to be different. And some guys are going to have a seemingly easy path that's going to be just a straight uphill climb, and some guys are going to have a perceived hard path where they're going to have twists and turns and ups and downs, and they're going to have some struggles along the way. And you can't spend all your time worrying about what other people are doing and where their comparables are. You need to just worry about yourself and what the organization sees, and not be concerned about worrying about where your place is in the organization. That will naturally look after itself as time goes on. So you try to build a bit of a relationship with them, and you start to build, hopefully a bit of a rapport where there's some trust at both sides as the time goes on. Because for a player, you've got some pretty big decisions coming up in the next, 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah, I guess, Jamie, you spent some time in the Alberta Junior Hockey League as well, some time ago, albeit back when our buddy Gord Thibodeau was coaching out in Lloydminster the first time. But I do want to ask you, it's the age-old question. A lot of families, they struggle with it. If you got a kid, does he go the junior A route? Does he go the WHL route? What sort of things, should a parent be looking for within their own son and player to determine if the WHL is the right path for them?
Well, we always try to sell it as the fact that the player will decide, the game will decide for them, right? You'll see as you play, as you climb up through Bantam Triple and Midget Triple, or you're in the CSSHL, or you decide to play a year of Junior A first before you make a decision about Junior A. You're going to see what other guys are doing, kids that you're aware of, and what they're doing. And you're going to see that, maybe you have the same skill set as they do, or maybe you're behind a little bit maturity-wise, both physically or or maybe you're not quite there yet as a young man. It's never an easy decision to make. Some people, they're clearly set on going one way or the other. I think you find that the very high-end guys that play junior A would have easily been able to play major junior also. And quite often the guys that play major junior could have been fairly elite at the junior A level, but not necessarily. It doesn't work just that easily. You've got to do your homework, and you've got to try to decide what is best for that specific child. Like, is he a good student? Isn't he? Is he mature? Is he not? Does he think that this path will help him if you have the belief that he's going to be a pro at some point, or you at least want that opportunity first? I mean, the WHL, the beauty of it is that you're earning education as you go along, so that if the pro aspect does not come about, you're still going to be able to go to a CIS school afterwards and have your education paid for. The junior A route, you've got to hope that you get that scholarship, which a lot of guys do, but you got to hope that there's enough out there and that you play well enough that you can move on, and then you've got to go and play in that program down south for 4 years and come back. And so relatively, they're both done about the same time, but I mean, it's a hard decision, and you've got to really research it a little bit, and you've got to be comfortable with the franchise that has your rights, and you've got to be comfortable that there's a place for you in that organization, whether it's at major junior or junior A.
You kind of touched on it there, the WHL scholarship package program. It's something that I think more and more is becoming widely known, but it's certainly something that is beneficial and something that I think every parent should know about when they're making that decision to go the WHL or junior A path. Can you maybe speak more to just sort of how that WHL scholarship program does work?
Well, first off, let me say that it's very easy to research, because there's just on the WHL website, all you've got to do is click on the education icon, and there's a lot of information there. So don't just take whatever I'm going to be able to throw together here. I mean, make sure if you're interested in it, go back and research it. There's a lot of information there, and you can even phone the league office and talk to the education advisors there. I mean, that's what they're for, is to give you some feedback and an idea. The thought is that for every year that you play in the WHL, you will earn a year of schooling, and which is books and tuition. And the majority of the guys will also play for a CIS school or a hockey team, and will also get a bit of a bump from them also. So the hope is, and the plan is that you can play hockey and try to see how far your dream can go, and still have the backup plan or a plan at the exact same time to get your schooling and secondary education done. And then that way you're no further behind anybody else if it should happen that you decide that the school route is more likely for you than being a pro. The interesting thing about the WHL program is it's not necessarily just for university. Guys can take it for a trade school. Guys can take it for any type of a specific secondary education that's recognized for whatever type of a job you're going to get into. We know that guys have used it to become an airline pilot, and we know that guys have used it for medical school, and we know guys have used it to go to NAIT and SAIT, and we know guys that have used it to, if you can believe it, there's a player that used it to go to lumberjack school. There's a player that used it to become a boat captain afterwards. Like it can be used in a lot of different ways, so that it benefits that specific person. And the WHL understands that once you decide to go in that direction, you are closing that other door to the junior A door, and so why not?
You mentioned that's obviously one of the major benefits of going the major junior route. There's more benefits to that, to playing in the Western Hockey League as well. And you're someone that can speak to this, because you've been part of an organization in one of the smaller markets in Swift Current, and now one of the major markets here in Edmonton. But I think it's almost not quite universal. The facilities that we have here in Edmonton don't go across the WHL, but from an overall standpoint, just maybe speak to the facilities, the resources that are made available by all WHL teams.
Yeah, I mean, the WHL has a standard that every team has to meet, and there isn't a team that lacks in anything, and they all have very strong support systems. I mean, yes, the rinks are varied. Yes, the travel is varied. The size of the markets is different, but I mean, they all have the same infrastructure in it. Everybody's got a quality coaching staff and management staff, and everybody has the WHL education is the same across the board. The support staffs are all excellent. Everybody has a professional group for that. The training staff, the equipment staff, your billeting, everything. We've got security. Everything is the same all the way through. And yes, I've worked for the smallest franchise in the CHL, and I work for one of the largest now, and the structure is the same. Obviously, a lot of the details are different, but the league is always pushing to raise the bar at all times, and everybody in the league follows along in that aspect, so that the best possible junior experience is shared by everyone.
The last one I got for you here, Jamie, and it's the age-old question that I think a lot of parents have, especially ones who haven't gone through it maybe with other kids or other family members having players play junior hockey, but it's when the time comes, hesitation to maybe send their kid to a province over, or sometimes in the WHL's case to a different country. What do you say to those parents?
Well, again, it goes back to after you've become a member of that organization, you want to build a bit of a relationship with that group and ask those questions. And our job, once the player is drafted and once he's a member and we start worrying about him as a hockey player, our job is also to educate the family about what it's going to take to play in a WHL market. Are you going to have to move a couple of provinces over? Are you going to have to move from another country? I mean, our European imports do it all the time. And those questions do come up. I mean, schooling is not the same through the 4 provinces. It is obviously a little bit different in the U.S. also. People, small market kids are worried about playing in a big market. Big market guys are worried about what it'll feel like to play in a small market. But I mean, once you have a comfort with that organization, and everybody is kind of on the same page, and you've got to kind of trust that everybody's working in good faith, and that those questions can be answered, and sometimes it's a fit and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get there and it's not for you, and then that has to be readdressed afterwards. But I mean, all the teams are very professionally run. All the teams are there for the right reasons. So it's a life adventure.
That's all I've got for Jamie Porter. Steve, I know you're on the call. If I'm missing anything, if there's any pertinent information that you feel that we haven't touched on yet, just feel free to unmute your mic and fire away.
Thanks, Andrew. Jamie, great to see you. An awesome session. Real wonderful information. I find interesting, and I think the parents and players will be really gratified to hear as well. So thank you, first of all. Maybe I'll toss one other one out there. And I was thinking, real interesting story you guys shared about practice the other day and how a player can get to that level and have missed out on that. And I have no doubt he's working like crazy to master that skill now. But I was just curious, you've got a long and rich history, really impressive career in the Dub, a big fan of all you've done. I was wondering, no need to mention names, was there one player that you sort of misread, probably younger in your career where maybe you make some mistakes and learn from it, but a player that you looked at and thought, no, and then he really surprised you with another team, and was there a lesson that you learned from that in terms of what to look for in players? And or of course sometimes it's a young age to be looking at and trying to project career paths already, but I didn't know if there's one that sort of reminds you when you're out looking at games, yeah, remember to do this.
I have a specific one in mind that I always fall back on, and I'm going to use his name because he's used it on me before. So there's a player that plays for the Buffalo Sabres, and his name is Cody Eakin. And Cody was my first round pick ever in Swift Current. And I remember sitting with him one night talking to him about, the way your game is growing and what you're doing. I don't know that you're going to be a high-end scorer in the Western League. You're going to kill penalties, and you're going to be a great two-way guy, and we certainly project that you're going to be our captain someday, but I just don't see where you're going in the game that you're going to do that. And the night that he scored his 50th goal, he sent me this nasty text, and he was playing for us, and everything was great. But it was a really good reminder as a professional that the players make those decisions. The players decide that, and the unique thing about junior players is if they really are driven, if they really do want those things, they will themselves to the next level. And that was one of the things with Cody was, this guy's my new boss, and he's telling me that I'm not going to be a scorer. I certainly am going to prove him wrong. And it was like 4 years later, he remembered the conversation. So, yeah, no, I have certainly done that.
That's a wonderful story. I'm going to ask one follow-up, and then I'll hand it back to you guys. Along those lines, I was curious, is there anything in particular that engages you watching a player when you see him, and then what keeps you engaged? What does he do to keep you engaged up to the point of the draft where he can remain high on your list?
So there's usually two things. It's not just one simple question. Usually, if there's one skill set that he has that is so dominant, and he consistently brings that all the time, that's enough for me to follow him. And if I like him as a player, but he may not have, like, maybe he's not an amazing skater, but he's a good skater. Maybe he's skilled but not exceptionally skilled. Maybe he's physical, but he doesn't hurt people or hunt or whatever the term is. Then my second thing is, if you work hard and compete, if you show up shift by shift, I will follow you. I will, it'll get to the point where you have to prove to me that you're not a player. I'll already accept that you are. Scouts have a tendency to try to be so negative and try to always break a player apart. You've got to be careful about that. You've got to always try to look at the positive side of it. And if you show up and you've got a skill set and you're going to compete shift by shift, period by period, you're going to have people paying attention to you.
Awesome. Well, I could ask a ton of questions, but I'll toss it back to you guys. Thanks again, and congrats on the amazing start. I can't believe that second year in a row you guys have been such a huge force, and you're getting pooched by the pandemic again.
We are an awesome team for no reason. Yes, it's been tough. Yes, thanks, Steve. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you, Jamie. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you, Steve, and yes, thank you, Jamie, and thank you for everyone who jumped on this. Very pleased with the partnership that we've got developing with Hockey Edmonton. We look forward to doing something down the road. And, again, thank you to Jamie for.
Thank you very much. Bye.